Let's see, do I look like shit? I look fine. Hey, there you go. Oh my god, your first message, Bede. Your first message, and it's that. Not only that, it was held back by the automatic thing. What's it called? Automatic moderation. Yeah, so we're waiting on Dylan to call. Don't know what he's doing. Probably he's streaming, just having a conversation with his chat or something. Yeah, actually keeping track of all the brigades involved in this is a little bit of a nightmare. Yeah. Uh, Trying to keep track of the new brigades, you know? From what I understand, it's 9 new brigades. The rest are just like reformed, like other brigades that have been reformed, like into new units, or upgrade units that were upgraded to brigades. 7 months of me being your first sub. Yay! True. Thank you, Beat. Although I'm not seeing all that much of that money, I need to get up like much further in like my streaming career. I think to start actually making money out of this. I mean, heck, I think that my greatest tip is from my aunt, which is not great when you think about it, you know. Oh, anywho. Okay. Okay. Let's check on Dylan. Oh my god. I missed the call. Of course I missed the call. It's always like this. Hello? Hello?
Oh, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you well. It's always I always miss the calls. I think I need to fix the notifications. Right now, it's just not ringing the thing. So I need to
Yeah,
check it
you can
constantly.
make whatever excuses you want, you Russian agent.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was doing. I was trying to keep to get the wiretap on in time, but
Yeah. So
the
did you
Kremlin
hear
fucked
that
up.
did you hear that we found some money in the couch cushions? We're getting $6.2 billion.
Uh, the U.S. is sending another big package.
No, the Pentagon found an accounting error
Oh,
that provided $6.2 billion for the Ukrainian military.
it's so
And
fucked up.
when I read the headline, I went on like a 5 minute rant of like, man, this is crazy that this is even possible. I mean, I know a lot of people talking about fudging the numbers, but I'm trying to figure out how could they would do this. And I said the dumbest way, and this is the scummiest way I've seen people do it, is including replacements for military gear. I don't know if you've seen it as well, where people will say that like if you send over a Bradley and we then like buy another Bradley, they'll include the purchase of the new Bradley and the
Oh,
amount of aid we
okay.
send over. It's really scummy. I
So
said
it's
there's
double counting Bradleys. I mean, no,
yeah.
actually, I think it's just the weird, really expensive pictures they're using at the Pentagon.
Yeah,
Like,
it's just they're double counting equipment basically, and I said that'd be the scummiest way for them to do it. And then I read the first paragraph, and that's exactly what happened.
okay, that's wonderful. I mean, heck, like 6.2 billion to lose between your cushions. That's more than the budget of the Greek military for every year. It's more than the budget. I think it's isn't it like something like almost.
That was more than the Ukrainian military's entire budget
Yeah,
before this war, I would
yeah.
assume.
I think it's almost 10 times as much as the Belarusian military.
Probably, yeah.
It is, yeah, it
Just
is insane to consider the amount of money that $6.2 billion is to lose in just like an accounting error. Anyway, you're in Kiev right now, right?
yeah, I'm back in Kiev. First off, do you want to introduce yourself so
Ah, of
people don't
course.
just like know they're not talking to a disembodied voice?
Of course, of course. Hi, everybody. My name is Richard Haney. I've spoken to Dylan a couple of times before. I'm doing my master's in international relations, security studies, and I've got a degree in military history. And I've basically been like a let's say a low tier commentator on the war in Ukraine. But at least I keep my head cool, and I won't you won't see me spouting a bunch of weird conspiracy theories. So you can check me out at Richard Haney 17 on Twitter, and on my Twitch, which is Richie underscore Haney, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about this developing counteroffensive. Now,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, there's a lot of information we don't know. The information space is extremely murky, and that's how people want it. So we can only go off of either what the Ukrainian military has publicly confirmed, or what the Russians have already publicly like spouted off on their Telegram channels. There's only so much information we can go off of, but can you tell us when this operation started, when the counteroffensive vaguely started, and give us some initial thoughts?
So I think it started out around the 9th or 10th of June was when the first reports started coming out, and then it was like it had fully started by the 11th and 12th. These things kind of take a bit of time. Anyway, it's a weird one. When I was discussing with Spanov Khan, another like commentator on the war, we kind of said that this is either gonna be like a huge blowout, like immediately they're gonna break every line and they're just gonna push aside all these tired units and make it to the Sea of Azov, which was a very optimistic view, or it would be a little bit like Kherson without the benefits that Kherson had, which is the Russians being over the river. Of course, this operation is much bigger than Kherson or Kharkiv. Kharkiv is very small compared to this. Kharkiv
Mhm.
is almost 10 times smaller than the battles that we're seeing right now. Well, actually, not the battles that we're seeing, the deployments that we're seeing, because the battles that we've seen, specifically around Velika Novosilka, and the other one is in close to Kamyansk in Piatki. There's a few other places around Velika Novosilka. They're also close to Rivnopil. Anyway, all the big. We haven't seen any like really big attacks. Like the fighting we've seen has been closer to like battalion level. It's we haven't seen any like multi-brigade big offensives, and
So wait, just
Yeah,
quickly.
of course.
So the that's the first thing I kind of want to get out of the way is that we're about a week to maybe 2 weeks in at this point. There's not like a direct start date. We weren't ever gonna get that with an operation like this when they're being so quiet about what's happening. Um, but would it be fair to say that the majority of forces that would be committed to such an operation have yet to be committed to the battle space?
I think that elements of a lot of the brigades that were new ones, because it's a little weird, but elements of the new brigades have been committed. I think the actually I have a list because it's actually kind of hard to keep track. Let me see. I think like the 47th, which is a newish brigade, it was like upgraded, has definitely been committed fully. I think the what else? The let me zoom in. The 82nd has been is at the front. The 35th is an older brigade. Anyway, elements 35th Marine is older, I think, but elements of the of certain brigades have been committed. There are 9 or 10 new brigades, I think, for the counteroffensive, plus all the brigades that were already in the front in Zaporizhia. Uh, yeah, the majority of forces has not been committed just by, brigades are pretty big units. If you're sending in a battalion or two, or if you're sending in just like teams of 100 or 200 soldiers, you haven't really committed the whole brigade. It's not a really big attack yet, and really the fighting that we've seen, especially around Velika Novosilka, when we saw that back and forth in those villages, those are a bit further away from the major defensive lines that are set up by the Russians. So, yeah, I don't think they've fully committed yet, and the reason is I think the hope is that just by not committing too much, they'll get the Russians to move to their first line of defense. So pushing them with the brigades that are already there, plus some elements of new ones, plus committing the artillery brigades, which don't really get hurt that much from fighting because they're not really in the front line. The artillery brigades, um, maybe some elements of them are, but the hope I think is to push the Russians back to their front line, to their major defensive line, so that they're able to group up the new brigades and use them to commit to a breakthrough. Because if they commit too early and get a bunch of the new brigades all bogged down in really bad like minefields, it's not gonna be too good because there's two lines of defense. There's 20 kilometers depth at least. They need to, if they're gonna go for a breakthrough, it needs to be decisive. So, in my opinion, they won't commit fully to an attack unless they're sure that they're gonna break through the front. Like they're gonna break through either both or at least one of the lines and cause a rout in other sectors. I think they aren't quite sure of that, and that's why the Ukrainians are somewhat holding back and engaging in smaller battles for to get closer to the defensive line. They've gotten a bit closer in Velika Novosilka, but they haven't really moved that much elsewhere.
I see a lot of social media posts and commentary calling them like shaping attacks. They're not really probing attacks, but like attacks to try to like shape the battlefield or move towards what would then be like a bigger attack. Is that generally how you would describe this?
Yeah, no, that's fair because like a probing attack is when you just like go in with small teams, maybe a few squads, and you probe the defensive line, seeing where you meet the most resistance, and just moving back. But shaping attacks, you fight for position before you launch like a bigger offensive, before you commit fully. Because if you're committing fully, you're going for a breakthrough. The new brigades you're committing, you want them to be fighting for at their peak effectiveness. You want them to be fighting against the harshest fortifications. You don't want them to get like to lose energy fighting for like smaller positions that you could conquer with your old brigades. So I think, for example, around Velika Novosilka, I think they're trying to eliminate the hill positions of the Russians that are in Rivnopil. That's what I think this shaping operation is about, and then they're trying to basically move the front back to the first defensive line, and then on the other side, I think they're trying to move it closer to Vasilivka, and what else is in this direction, if I remember correctly. What is it, Plohoy? Forgetting right now. This map isn't great. Yeah, Plohoy is a bit further east. But yeah, generally they are shaping operations still, in my opinion, because they just haven't committed that many troops yet. Like they've committed like a few battalions, and we've seen some losses, but we haven't seen anything crazy. We've
Yeah,
seen, we've seen,
I
yeah,
believe the last report I read from the Kiev Independent seems to indicate that the Ukrainians have liberated 8 villages so far in 2 weeks. Which, I mean, considering the type of fighting we saw over, like, for example, small pieces of land over the winter time, that's not really surprising. But that isn't like the lightning fast movement that we saw around Kharkiv. That wasn't what we were
no,
expecting, but
no.
it's obviously a marquee difference.
Yeah, I think all those villages are on the line in Velika Novosilka. I think it's like I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them are over here, plus Piyatki 8.
Yes, eight
Yeah,
eight villages.
yeah. So like, yeah, those are like right on the front. They don't really. It isn't really an indication of like major progress. I think personally that um, if the Ukrainian command is not satisfied with their shaping operations, they might not go in all in at all. They might wait further to build up more forces. Of course, a question here is in what shape are the Russians to actually stand up against a really major attack? So there are a few questions floating around. You have in one sense you have, okay, will we commit and run the risk of bogging down in the first or second defensive line? Do we commit and we hit them hard, we bog down a little bit, but then there's a rout from the Russians because they can't fight
By the way,
anymore?
you keep referencing the first defensive line.
Hmm.
Where is the first defensive line, the real first defensive line,
Uh,
and what type of defenses are there?
so the first defensive line is around 10 kilometers behind the front. Let me actually get a map out to show exactly where, and maybe draw a couple of arrows. Just a second. Okay, there. Okay. Um, do you want me to share my screen, or maybe I'll send you a link?
Um, I guess send me a link would probably be better.
All right, cool. There you go.
Okay, let's see what have you sent me here.
Is it working?
Something's loading, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. It's it's not vibing with me. Uh, this
I
is
I was told ISW has a good map, and also
that
Blue
has
Rider
it
19. Thank you for
has
the
it
5
have
gifted
they
tier ones.
overlaid them?
I don't know. I was just told this in chat.
Yeah, this is where I was getting them from. Oh, there it loaded for me.
It did not. Oh, there we go.
It took a little bit of time, but you can see the two lines. I mean, two and something. The defensive lines are much more
Or
robust.
so these red dots are the defensive lines.
Yeah, well, it's the dots are just like points that when you zoom out, it connects them together, and it's kind of the defensive line. It's not that each dot is like a disconnected like strong point. They are parts of the same line. But because you asked what do these lines constitute, so what the lines kind of look like is you start out with an anti-tank ditch, which, if you remember, it was the long Russian trench that people were making fun of
Mm-hmm.
a little while ago. It's not a trench for soldiers; it's an anti-tank ditch. It's for to stop vehicles, basically. So you start out with an anti-tank trench, then you have mines, and then you have dragon's teeth, and then you have the trenches that have soldiers in them. and I think that's like a depth of about 1 kilometer, something like that. And the idea is that the dragon's teeth, by the way, they're connected together with wire. They're not like the dragon's teeth that you would see in, let's say, somewhere like the Siegfried line in World War II, which they're all like all concrete and dug into the earth. These basically like cement triangles. What they're meant to do is not completely stop a vehicle in its tracks. The idea is that if you ram them, they might go under your tank and puncture holes in the belly or destroy the tracks. They, it's not really a good idea to really run into them. You could technically go over them, and we've seen some cases where that happens, but you still would prefer to use bulldozers, like the not bulldozers, mine clearing vehicles that have or engineering vehicles that can push through them. But then again, when you're dealing with that, you have to deal with first the infantry that's going to be aiming ATGMs at those vehicles. So it's actually kind of a complex operation to get through defensive lines like this, and we actually haven't yet gotten to them. All we've seen is like positional fighting for some small villages ahead of the front line. Because if you see, can you go into the map near Velika Novosilka? Or I'm not sure if you're there already.
You want me to go up to the front near? Okay, 1 second. Let me get off this image.
Sure.
Okay, where were we? Okay. Second, it's a different map. I'm lost.
Don't worry, don't worry.
God, all the dots actually just make it worse.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in one map of the dots, you're probably gonna see Velika
Okay,
Novosilka.
yes, yeah, okay, there it is, yes.
All right, if you look at Velika Novosilka, that's where the fighting has been taking place, and if you see the winding river and the villages there, I think the Ukrainians are in Makarivka. That's the deepest they have gone, and the idea is that they're trying to capture the hills that are on like centered on Rivnopil, which is
Mhm.
somewhat to the west.
Yeah, to its
of it.
left.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if you see the first defensive line starts after Staromivka, Staromlivka, yeah. And that's so they are still how long is that? Maybe 10 kilometers away. So yeah, I think that they're trying to shape the operations, shape the front, get as close as possible to the defensive line, and then launch a big assault with their multiple
Try
new
to punch
mechanized
through the
brigades.
line.
Exactly. And I think the Velika Novosilka area makes sense because the second line of fortifications isn't quite complete, in my opinion, in this area. Of course, there is a decision for the Ukrainians to make when deciding where to really try and punch through, and it is the decision between using a better road network, which is, as you can see, the more fortifications are around Tokmak because that's where the better road network is, or um, elect to go off-road through smaller roads and face less fortifications. And I think that's what they're gonna probably choose. I think they're gonna try and punch through through the Velika Novosilka sector and use smaller roads to get on the main roads to Berdyansk. I think they're gonna try to avoid the really, really thick defensive lines that are near Tokmak, even though they've made probing assaults there,
Of
like the
course,
one in.
this
Yeah.
is, of course, this is all speculation.
Of course, yeah.
Um,
Don't know.
when it comes to these Ukrainian attacks, I would like to ask. There's been a lot of pictures of Western armor, a lot of pictures of tanks that have either been disabled temporarily or permanently. Um, the casualties we're seeing now, are these the casualties you would tend to expect in an operation like this,
Yeah.
or is it an extraordinary amount of tanks showing like an exceptional amount of failure?
No, no, no. I don't think it's an exceptional amount of failure. Sure, it's a little bit shocking to like maybe a Western audience that hasn't seen, leopards being destroyed in quite a while. But this is a really big front with a lot of soldiers on it. And we've seen maybe what, like 20 vehicles, 30 vehicles? Maybe I'm even exaggerating. This in a fairly large offensive that it's in its early days. We're gonna see more losses. The more I think the losses that sting particularly are the losses in engineering vehicles. Like I don't know, it was one of the pictures that were circulating um, that that had a couple of Leopard R2s, I think, that were meant to be doing mine clearing work. And I think it was Finland that sent 6 of them, and 3 of them were lost. However, a lot of them will be recovered. Like even the losses that we see right now, we're not 100% sure what their eventual outcome is, because if Ukraine takes over that position, those will eventually be like recovered. If they're in too bad a shape, they'll be sent off to Poland. If they're in a decent enough shape, they can be repaired on the field and sent back to the front. I mean, if a tank runs over a mine, for example, and loses its tracks, sure, for that attack it's disabled. But you can probably get it back in working order soon enough. And we've already seen evidence that Ukrainians are recovering some of these vehicles. Now, losses in manpower, I'm not 100% sure what those are looking like, but I doubt they're very serious. We haven't seen anything crazy yet. And yeah, I think people should expect casualties, and I think people shouldn't be like, I don't know, coping about them. I've seen some really weird conspiracisms about like, oh no, this video or this photo is actually photoshopped and it's actually generated by AI, and bullshit like that. Sure, I mean, yeah, the Russians lie a lot, and there's gonna be like a few fabrications, but the fabrications tend to be found out immediately. uh, like if you have to argue for like a week about a like one tank casualty, I think you're losing the plot. We're missing the the forest for the trees here.
Hmm.
What we should be looking at is like higher level stuff. Is how is this offensive going? Are we getting close to any objectives? What is the overall plan? I think people should expect vehicle losses, and they should expect worse vehicle losses, because we aren't even yet to the major defensive lines.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And
that's
the
my
majority of
take.
forces still have yet to be committed. The more
Exactly,
troops you have
exactly.
in the field, the more opportunities for somebody to get hurt, somebody to get killed.
Hmm.
I I want to shift this away from the Zaporozhye for a second, because while this is where we're expecting a big push eventually, and this is where areas are getting liberated, there are also other areas where fighting is ongoing. And the area around Bakhmut, even though the urban center has been captured by the Russians, fighting around Bakhmut is still ongoing, with the Ukrainians seemingly liberating more and more territory, to the surprise of many, because many thought, after the Russians captured it, it would kind of be a quiet front, but it's not very quiet right now. What's going on around Bakhmut?
I think the Ukrainians made some fairly concerted pushes to just move the Russians away from the bigger they had tried to do an enveloping move, if you remember, before actually fighting in the center. Once their enveloping move kind of failed, that's when they decided to push into the town. So the big, let's say, calipers, or the wings of the encirclement were still there. So the Ukrainians just kind of pushed those back and made the front more straight. So running from basically Klishivka, Bakhmut, and then further north to Krasna Hora and Sakoy Vasenti, which is a very small village. So they're inching closer to the Bakhmutska River, but I don't really expect a major offensive here. I have discussed the possibility of it, but I think that the gains that could be achieved here are limited. Um, even if it's like the wildest success, let's say the Ukrainians manage to capture Solidar, punch through on the other side, take Klishivka and Kudrimovka, and now they have Bakhmut almost like semi-encircled. Let's say they exploit this success and move on. I think the best they could hope for is maybe punch a depth of around 30 kilometers, because then they run into really serious hills, and actually there's some of the fortifications of the old Donbass front line. They would be recapturing Bakhmut if they actually, you know, uh, did succeed in that area, which would be a PR like a massive PR success. But in terms of strategic value, the same way as we were discussing the that Bakhmut isn't such a huge strategic success, it would be the same for the Ukrainians as well. Recapturing Bakhmut isn't a huge like a huge success in terms of strategic goals.
Yeah,
Nothing like
there's only
Zaporizhia.
so much you can do with a city which every piece of rubble inside of it has been lit on fire 3 times over.
Yeah, the main positive of Bakhmut is that it's like a railway and road hub. It
But
connects
yeah, but it's been
its area.
completely
Yeah,
demolished.
it's been completely demolished, and after all, like most other things in this area are being serviced already. Like, okay, let's say the Ukrainians capture Bakhmut, then what? They'll push on to Popasna. They'll try to pass over Svitlodarsk and the reservoirs there, or will they attack the old Donbass line? Maybe try to go through Horlivka. The only positive I can see here is that units in this area are kind of exhausted, like the Russian ones. Ones in Bakhmut, not necessarily, but DPR units, the ones in Horlivka, ones further
These
north.
are the people drafted under occupation, correct?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Some of them are drafted under occupation. Some of them are like Donbass
Which I do
volunteers.
want to note that is a war crime, drafting people under occupation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is like force. The Nazis did that quite a lot. They force drafted Czechs. They force drafted Poles. They force drafted Frenchmen, and a lot of them died on D-Day. Actually, they some of them couldn't even.
That's actually there's a
Yeah.
scene in Saving Private Ryan,
Hmm.
which a lot of people don't look at the translation for it. But there's these two people who walk up to the American soldiers and put their hands up, and they're actually speaking Czech. They're not even speaking German. They're saying we don't even want to be here, and then the American soldiers kill them. Most people didn't bother to go look at what they were saying. They just assumed they were German, but they're actually Czech in
Yeah,
that scene.
the thing is, in terms of yeah, I remember that scene, and it is horrific to think about. In terms of military value, units that are forcibly conscripted from occupied populations are pretty much worthless. The only thing you can really do with them is stick them in a trench and hope they won't like panic and run immediately. Maybe they'll be more afraid of you than they are of maybe holding on. Um, Generally, the hardened like veteran DPR and LPR units of the from the war in Donbass, those have been treated really heavily with fighting last year, and a lot of them are still in this area between Donetsk and Horlivka, and a lot more of them are around Kremina, if I'm not wrong. I think they are in the forests there, close to Kremina. So if the Ukrainians decide to push here, the benefit is they would be facing units that have been treated heavily. On the other hand, the strategic goals
Well,
that could be
there's
achieved
also the
here.
factor of the Russians haven't had enough time to put up strong defensives here. They just captured it, so there's not a lot of strong trenches like in a lot of areas where they
There
could be launching
isn't
counteroffensives.
there isn't a defensive line like there is in Zaporizhia, but there is the old defensive lines from 2015, and the terrain is just not very favorable. So yeah, sure, you'd have to deal with treated units, but then again, you have to deal with way more hills and like rivers running like parallel to your lines. It's not as good. It's not as good a place for big mechanized pushes as is Zaporizhia. And of course, the name of the game is also speed. If you're gonna attack in an area with bad terrain, even if it is manned by weaker units, it takes time to clear them out. It takes time to deal with harsh terrain. So it gives more time to the Russians to rotate reserves. Even though the Ukrainians do, I'm pretty sure they do maintain a superiority in numbers right now. In the Zaporizhia front, especially with these 10 new brigades on top of what they had there already.
So
So
I
yeah.
wanted I wanted to move over to Luhansk
Hmm.
because right now there's a lot of noise about while the Russians everywhere seemingly have come to the decision that they need to sit in place and try to hold on to what they got with the coming Ukrainian counteroffensive. There's one area where this isn't the case, and that is in Luhansk right now, where Russian soldiers seem to be on the forward march again towards positions like Lyman and others, in an attempt to take back what the Ukrainians took during the Kharkiv counteroffensive. Can you talk about this and what the purpose behind this would be?
I think I don't know if they do you remember the big Pentagon leaks? Um,
Yes, from the National Guardsman who leaked it all into the Thug
yeah,
Shaker Discord server, or
just
top tier journalism.
oh my god, yeah, this is like literal like clown show. The fact that this guy was able to leak that much stuff and it for it to go unnoticed for that long. Anyway,
Hmm.
something that we did see in those leaks, if we are to take them, of course we shouldn't take them at face value. There are some issues with them, but something that they did show is that the Russians had a superiority in manpower on the front in Luhansk, and they were hoping, I think, to wait and see what's going on with the Ukrainian counteroffensive before going on any offensive operation. Because once you've committed to an offensive operation, it's harder to just shift units around to other places. So I think they were hoping for the Ukrainians to either commit or bog down in Zaporizhia so that they could activate again and go on the offensive here. Now, I don't know what success they could achieve. They haven't really moved that much since what was it yesterday or 2 days ago that supposedly attacks had started taking place. I had seen some buzz that they had crossed the Oskil River up north near Kupiansk, but I think their bridge was like tiny. This is unremarkable so far. There hasn't been anything really big. Now, I've seen some Ukrainian channels saying that there's heavier fighting taking place now. So I think we should wait and see. If there's any goal for the Russians here, is to retake the front line along the Oskil River and the Oskil Reservoir, because by doing that, they could free up a lot more units for attacks elsewhere. I think that like going further than that or trying to get to Izium again, it's kind of a fool's errand. Like they would have to expend a lot of resources and they wouldn't be getting that much out of it uh,
It seems
right
it
away.
seems that the majority of majority of what I've been told is that a lot of this attacks is in the Lyman direction, which the Russians want to capture back, lost during the Kharkiv counteroffensive. But if the purpose here is to push them back to the Oskil River, free up more troops, couldn't there be a problem where it fails, this backfires, and all they did is kill many of the troops that they wanted to free up?
Yeah, of course. I think that of course it could fail and they could have losses for no reason, but I doubt they would like keep on going Vuledar style until they completely attrit any unit they wanted to rotate. I mean, here I think the manpower advantage of the Russians is quite substantial. So I think that if they started seeing like losses that were kind of big without much progress, I think they would just stop because they've done probing attacks in this direction for a long time. They've tried to take back positions. They've fought over, especially when the Kharkiv counteroffensive started like drawing down, and the Ukrainians were slowing down near Svatove because there was a lot of discussion that maybe they could get to it. Um, there was a lot of fighting there, and back and forth like positional fighting has taken place for a while. So I think that if they started taking major casualties, they would they would just say, okay, let's let sleeping dogs lie. Let's not like push our luck here, and let's concentrate on say stopping Ukraine in Zaporizhia. Because after all, I don't think the Russians will overcommit to anything before they see the Ukrainians commit fully to their attacks in Zaporizhia. Because I
So you
think
think
that's just what
you
they're
think
doing.
they're holding off in case, something for them, but for us it would be different. But for them, something really bad happens, say their first line gets broken through and a bunch of Ukrainian soldiers start flooding through the breakthrough in the line. Maybe they have to, you know, just scramble whatever they can to try to plug up the holes.
Yeah, they have their local reserves, and they have committed some of their local reserves to areas around Velika Novosilka. They've even tried to do localized counterattacks. Um, the localized counterattacks to me don't make that much sense. I think that like maybe they're doing it because they don't want to do any like step back type deal. Like if you can take back the position, take it. Um, but maybe they're exhausted and they're trying to show that like oh, we're still here. I'm not sure exactly why they're doing these localized counterattacks, but with they still have a few reserves in Zaporizhia, and of course the Ukrainians haven't committed. Yeah, I think when you commit to an offensive, you might need to commit reserves to that in order for it to not fail. So you don't want to be committing to an offensive while you're expecting a major offensive yourself, unless it's a spoiler offensive. You can do that. However, if you're going to do like a spoiler offensive, you could do it in the same area where you're
What
expecting
do
an
you mean by a
offensive.
spoiler offensive, by the way?
So this happened a lot in World War II as well. So you're expecting an attack. Maybe your enemy wants to improve their line, or they're gonna do a big attack, and you decide, instead of facing their attack, to create a problem for them to solve. Say attack in a different direction and actually threaten something important. The difference is that I don't think the Russians are in a position to do a really major spoiler offensive, because any attack that they would do towards the Oskil River would be physically limited by the Oskil River. If we were in this situation now, where Ukraine was beginning an offensive in Zaporizhia, and the Russians still held Izium, they still held Balaklia, they still held all that area that is in Veliki Burluk, all that area in the Kharkiv Oblast. They could have some serious potential for a spoiler offensive. I don't. I mean, this is just speculation on my end, but I don't think any attack in the area of Liman or Svatov would produce that wanted effect, and it would also risk um, reducing the amount of reserves that the Russians have in case of an emergency, like the Ukrainians breaking one of their defensive lines, especially if they break their defensive line around Velika Novosilka, because beyond that, there aren't that many defensive positions that have been fully fortified. Because in this area, the Russians are just hoping to use the bad roads and like harsher terrain to their advantage. Um, unlike
Okay.
in Tokmak, say.
So I wanted to also ask, because we've touched on it briefly, about the Western armor, a lot of the Western gear that's being provided. So two things I wanted to focus on. Number one, the Western armor, the Leopards, the Bradleys, the stuff that's being used by these newly formed brigades that could be used to smash through the Russian lines here if the Ukrainians get what they want, and the effect that could have on the battlefield if there's a marked improvement between the Western gear that's been given to them and the gear that the Ukrainians have been using, and whether we're going to see that impact on the battlefield. That's the first part of my question, and I before I put the second part of my question out there, I wanted to get your response to that.
Sorry, the last part. What did you say there?
Well, that's the first part of my question. I want that answer before I give you the second part of my question.
It was about the
The
Western.
Western armor
Yeah.
are the big American about a big German tank good, big German tank bad.
Okay.
There's
Okay.
the most
Okay.
simple way to put
Yeah.
it.
Sorry, I missed that little like last part there. Yeah. So the Western armor is really like good in terms of like technology. Like the Leopard 2A6s, for example, are really good tanks. The Challenger 2, okay, it's maybe a little bit outdated. It's canon, but overall, it's a good tank. I don't. I mean, I would say the biggest for me the biggest good thing is the Bradleys. The Bradleys are really nice because the Ukrainians have been fighting with few proper IFVs for a while. They have their old Soviet infantry fighting vehicles like their BMP 2s and BMP 1s, some captured BMP 3s. Those are decent. The M113s and MRAPs that the Americans sent are frankly not recommended for the kind of fighting that Ukraine is doing. Like those are meant to roam around in Iraq and running over mines. That's what their job is. Not going off road particularly. They're not very well suited to that. They're fairly thin skinned. Those aren't very good. The M113s, they are leftovers from Vietnam, and they are way too thin skinned and way too undergunned for any kind of fighting. But the Bradleys are really good. They're very well protected for their class. They have good armaments. I think they have the TOW missiles. They have 30 millimeter autocannon singular. I think don't quote me. I'm not like a very good like an expert. Yeah, so the Bradleys are really good because they save their crews, and the Ukrainians have said so far. The Leopard 2 A4s, they are slightly under armored for what is going on, but so are some older like Ukrainian T-64s. I did see a picture of a Leopard 2A4 with its roof caved in after it got hit with loitering munition, which isn't ideal. But I think that's like kind of, I don't know, small game, like minor things. uh, the they in the grand scheme of things, the difference between a T-72 in Ukraine's hand, like, or a PT-91, like the Polish upgraded T-72, or say a Leopard 2A4 or a Leopard 2A6 even, isn't that huge. The main thing they provide is more protection for their crews, but in their role, they're essentially going to face the same things. And everybody who says, "Oh, all those big tank battles, the Leopard 2 is gonna fucking destroy," I'm sorry, the Leopard 2 is gonna destroy all these Russian T-72s in a head-to-head like they did, back in Desert Storm. It's not really like that. Engagements in this war have rarely seen tank battles. Most of the time, it's tanks engaging infantry with anti-tank weapons. A lot of the times, it is tanks just supporting infantry in trench attacks, one or two tanks at a time. We haven't seen any big tank battles, and we probably won't. And I think a big part of it has to do not only with the extensive minefields and set front lines. It's also the fact that you have to deal with the Ukrainian countryside, and there's a lot of farms and farm plots that have tree lines separating them, and that you've seen a lot of battle for tree lines. The tree lines kind of reduce the visibility and the huge advantage that some Western armor has in terms of optics. So, like, your optics can be really great at 3 kilometers, but if you can't see through a tree line at 1,000 meters, what's the point of having the better optics? Better night vision is something that's good on Western equipment. But I think generally the best of the Russian gear also kind of has it, like their BMP3. I'm not sure about the BMP3s, but I think their T90Ms do. So I think that like the Western gear is good, and I want to see those Abrams arrive eventually. I think 30. The Americans are shooting 31.
31.
Yeah. I think the Leopard ones. I don't know if they have been delivered. I certainly haven't seen them fight in the front line. But Leopard ones, oh, those are gonna be bad for their crews. Honestly, I'm really worried about Ukrainian soldiers in Leopard ones. Because honestly, the Leopard 1 has a thinner skin than the T-54, 55 that we've seen the Russians deploy. But certainly thinner than the T-62, which
So
is really concerning.
the other weapon I wanted to ask you about is the Storm Shadow missile.
Mhm.
It is the first missile of its length that the Ukrainians can use to fire as far as it allows them to. 250, I think it was 250 kilometers. We're talking about max range, potential to use that to strike targets in Crimea. How can this be used to assist the Ukrainian counteroffensive anywhere on the front?
Of course, these are probably going to be used to attack like command posts and supply dumps. At least what has been seen by the Western intelligence and Ukrainian intelligence, and that's going to provide a really big like advantage in localized pushes and attacks, especially if they cause panic among troops who are trying to reach out to command and nobody's responding. So I think there might be a lot of them sent out if there's going to be a really massive attack taking place, because you don't want to be pot-shotting like command centers or making strikes of opportunity that much, because you might have the Russians wisen up and hide them better. If you know a lot of them exist, you want to, I don't know, save up for like a big decapitation strike, let's say, of the command of the Russian command in Zaporizhia, especially if you're gonna go for a really big attack. Supply depots aren't as well concentrated as they used to be. We don't see that many big depot explosions. I don't know if you remember back when HIMARS arrived. That
Yeah, yeah,
used
I
to be.
remember.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We don't see that much anymore. Um, I think, of course, like the deeper you strike and the more important the target, the more likely it is that the Russians will have deployed more air defense. And just like the Russian missiles, I'm pretty sure Storm Shadow is also vulnerable to like conventional air defenses, and the Russians have a lot of air defenses. So
Mhm.
they'll have to utilize them carefully, not waste them. They're not gonna be doing attacks like the Russians, like striking into like I don't know, like substations or civilian targets, like a lot of what they used to do. Now they don't do
Mhm.
that as much. They try to mostly target like air defenses. It's weird. Like the Russian missile strategy is kind of odd at the moment. I'm not sure what to make of it. I think they're
Do you think its intent is to simply overwhelm the Ukrainian air defense, just run it out? Because the leaks we got from Jack Textera seem to indicate that Ukrainian air defense was not particularly fantastic. We know that between the date that was leaked and we saw that in the public, and when it was originally developed, there was improvements, and since then there's been even more improvements with Patriot air defense systems,
Mhm.
at least two of them being given to the Ukrainians, more air defense from other countries. Do you think that could be a possible motivation, though?
I think there has been improvements since then. I think they don't wanna I mean they would want to overwhelm the air defenses. I don't think they're in a position to do that now. I know everybody was like joking about, oh, like when are the missiles gonna end? Like, oh, are they gonna end now? Are they gonna end now? But they're not gonna end. The Russians have like gotten their production in order from what I've seen, but they don't have a huge stockpile to just like fire off hundreds of missiles like every day. They still can fire. I think, what do they fire? Maybe 10 or 20 a week now, something like that. I think
Something around those lines,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think what they're doing now is that they're producing them in batches and launching them, and I think they'll be able to keep that up basically forever. I think they're probably gonna try to strike air defense directly instead of trying to overwhelm it with volume. Um, of course, air defense are valuable targets, and if Ukrainian air defense gets treated quite a lot, then the Russian Air Force could get more committed to any major attack that Ukraine does. So that's a problem. I mean, that Ukraine doesn't have air superiority, and doing a major offensive like this without air supremacy hasn't been done in a long time, in a really long time. So we're in a bit of uncharted territory here, in my opinion. And I think quite a bit will rest on how many reserves the Russians have and how well rested these soldiers are, in what condition they are. I think if those soldiers are really exhausted or the lines
Also,
are
if they know what
undermanned.
they're doing, I mean, we've seen a lot of these videos around Bakmut, especially, of armor breaks through and like half the unit just kind of runs away.
Yeah, I mean that's the hope, honestly. But the thing is, as long as there are warm bodies in a trench, it's hard to push it. Unfortunately, it's even if they are low quality units, which a lot of them will be, they're probably gonna be stiffened up with veterans here and there, like being sent in more important positions. And I think that they will be good enough, for that job. But of course, I don't know how strong the main Ukrainian attack will be when it comes. If it comes, I think it will. Some people, like the ISW, said that they could be suspending or actually pausing the counteroffensive. I don't know about that. I couldn't tell you. I haven't. I think that if they aren't satisfied with their shaping operations, they might pause it. But I think we still have to wait a little bit to see what Chef Zaluzhny is cooking up. Let's see.
Got you. I do want to ask you about some other opinions that I saw out there. Did you see the David Sachs post? the big post titled "The Failing Counteroffensive in the Peace That Could Have Been," where he paragraph posts a lot of information about the counteroffensive. Have you seen it?
Isn't David Sachs is that economist that like ruined Russia, right? Like during the what was it the shock treatment? Uh,
I don't believe that was this David Sachs. David Sachs. This is the one that Elon Musk's always friends with. Elon Musk actually responded to this thread saying, "Well said." He was
oh,
very
oh, yeah, that guy. Yeah, no, I know what you're referring to. These people's opinions are frankly worthless. Like,
worthless.
yeah, I mean, look, you go back. All you have to do to realize just how worthless their opinions is just go back like a month on their posts, maybe 2 months, 3 months. Eventually, what you'll find out is that they predict Ukraine's downfall like every week, and
Douglas
they've been
McGregor is a really good example of
yeah, yeah,
that. Somebody who
exactly.
keeps predicting Ukraine's about to fall every single time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like downfall's imminent, and it has been imminent like every week since March 2022. Like, come on.
They're doomsday preachers, really.
Yeah, first of all, they're doomsday preachers. Second of all, a lot of them are like, paid shills. I don't wanna. I'm not a
Can
hundred
I can
percent
I ju-
sure.
can I just read the first paragraph of his post?
Go right ahead.
With each passing day, it's becoming clear that the Ukrainian counteroffensive is failing to achieve any of its originally stated objectives. Recall, the Biden administration's bet was that the counteroffensive would roll back Russian territorial gains, cut the land bridge to Crimea, and force Russia to the negotiating table. That is almost certainly not going to happen. On the contrary, a stalemate is more likely, or even that Russia will take more territory and win the war, as Mearsheimer has predicted. Mearsheimer, he's referring to the
Mmm.
realist
The neorealist, yeah.
geopolitical analyst boy. Yep. So
Oh,
what do you think? What do
Mearsheimer.
you think of this paragraph? There's a lot more here, right? But it's the rest of it's kind of just I don't know if it goes
Well,
grandstanding. What do you think? What do you think of this paragraph?
if Mearsheimer says so, damn. I mean, okay. In all like fairness, okay. We haven't seen the offensive like achieve its major objectives because it has barely fucking started. It's been what, like 2 weeks. So it's like the meme with Julian Ropke, where every time he sees like a burning vehicle, it's like, it's so over, bros. Like the offensive, the offensive has failed.
I remember that started with the Kherson
Uh
counteroffensive, where
huh.
there was like some burning vehicles that came on and said, "Oh, it looks like the counteroffensive has completely failed. It's all over." And then 2 months later, Kherson was liberated.
Yeah. Of course, like what the situation in Kherson is slightly different because you don't have like the supply problem the Russians had there. However, it's still a bit early to say that the offensive has failed, and I would consider this like offensive a failure if the Ukrainians like fully committed and then they couldn't, like they destroyed their forces in the process of getting bogged down in defensive line. That's what I would consider the a failure. I think that if Ukraine is probing this line and they realize that they can't break it, and with minimal losses they decide to call it off and move to another sector, or try to build up more forces, lobby the West for more equipment, I don't think that's a major failure. I would think that that is a prudent like use of your equipment and care. Saying that, oh, Russia could counterattack and win the war, something as huge as that, I mean, hold your horses, buddy. Like, even in the worst case scenario, like Ukraine loses the extra brigades it had, Russia wasn't making much progress against the brigades that were already at the front. So, to expect them to suddenly burst into action without further mobilization, since that, like, partial one they did, uh, like, what was it now, almost a year ago? uh don't expect anything like of the sort of what he says. So every part of what he said is very misleading. So if that makes sense. And yeah, these people like blue check mark fucking like analysts that just analysts, that's a charitable term, that just say anything that comes into their mind, Doomsday predictions. Don't trust these people. This war is much slower and much more methodical than they make it out to be, and they also tend to be strongly biased, let's say.
Yeah, I'm of the belief that if you bet against David Sachs, you'll make money every time.
Yeah, that's a fair bet. There's a lot of people like that where they say one thing and the opposite comes out almost true. I don't know if you've heard of them, like guys like Geroman or Jeroman. I don't know. He shows up a lot. He's like a weirdo Austrian tanky anti-vaxxer. Uh, and
I thankfully have not run into
yeah,
this person.
you're lucky. He's a big meme among like analysts. But like for example, I don't know. You probably seen Defmon, right?
Yes, I see Defmon.
Yeah,
Slippers, by the way, thank you for tier 1. Yeah, I've seen Defmon.
yeah. Defmon makes fun of him on the regular. so if you follow Defmon, you'll see him make fun of Geroman quite often. But yeah, like there to I want to be fair. There's also people on the information space that support Ukraine, but will often say completely either nonsensical or completely exaggerated statements. They will
Well, I
make you
think
think that victory is around the corner.
Yeah, I think a
Yeah.
lot of people. Well, I can understand the spirit of the Well, the Ukrainian people, they're fighting for their freedom and the willpower. I can understand a general sentiment like that, but a lot of people, I think, want what they believe is morally correct to align with material reality. That morally, the Ukrainians are in the right. Morally, the Ukrainians deserve to have their country free, but that doesn't necessarily bear out on the battlefield 100% strategically with guarantee. And that has been true of many independent struggles and many moral, righteous causes throughout history. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that they're going to lose or anything. I'm just saying that anybody who thinks this war is over is sorely mistaken. And this is something that Ukrainian soldiers emphasize to me over and over and over again.
Yeah. It's far from over, and also I think a big part of it is that it's actually fairly easy clout if you have any type of credentials. Let's say you have a PhD in military history or international relations,
Who would
or
have that? Probably just fucking nerds.
yeah. So true. I mean, heck, like guys, for example, Phillips O'Brien or Thomas Steiner. You've probably seen them. They're pretty well known. But or Trent Teleco, all these guys, Chuck Pfeffer. Those four are probably the
Mm-hmm.
worst ones,
Mm-hmm.
worst offenders. I think they get a lot of clout out of
Mm-hmm.
basically like presenting the most positive imaginable image. Like Thainer, for example, was saying that the Ukrainians have only committed 2 out of their 35 brigades for this offensive. Whoa there, buddy. How many brigades are we counting? There's 9 frontline new ones, I think. And then there's maybe another 15 or 20 in the whole front that probably not all of them are going to be used for their big breakthrough. Are you also counting brigades that are in the front in Donetsk and Bakhmut? How are you counting 35 brigades? I mean, that same guy said that over the winter, 100,000 Russian soldiers would die of the cold. So when I see predictions like that, I have the sense that I could become a famous commentator despite my lack of credentials.
Yeah,
Hey,
I mean,
yeah,
I'll see some of these predictions, and I'll just kind of ignore them, and I'll just keep going most of
that's
the
the
time.
healthy thing to do.
Because I don't even know what to say to somebody who's that high on their own supply. I
Yeah.
feel like there's nothing I can say to kind of shake them out of it.
No, you can't really say anything. So, I honestly, I think in order to keep a really decent and balanced diet of media, I would say what you should do is look at guys like Defmon, who makes updates semi regularly. You can look at guys like John Henlin, I think, who also makes really good corrections and just will very often correct misinformation.
Hmm.
Osint East also corrects misinformation very often. If you follow these guys, you're gonna get like a really good picture of what's going on without without having to deal with all these like weirdo propagandists like Russian trolls, spin doctors, all these people that eventually just like murk the waters, either by telling you what you want to hear the most, or by like
Yeah, I
catastrophizing or stuff
people
like
do that
that.
all the time, by the way. People I think need to notice more when they're doing that. When they're scrolling on Twitter and they'll see a take on something or they'll see some information, they don't like it, so they'll just keep scrolling about that topic until they find something that paints their side in the best light, whether when it comes to like what's the odd that you come out on top or that your side's doing the best things ever.
Mm.
I people do it all the time. Just look for something to confirm to them that they're correct, or to confirm to them that victory is imminent. And that's a part of the reason why when election season comes around, these times, like every side is shocked when they don't come out on top.
Yeah, it's yeah. I think it's like a base, the basis of like human like instincts to just like seek out like affirmation for your positions and for your hopes.
Hmm.
So you seek out information
By the
that's
way,
not
I'm right about
positive.
yeah. All by the way, my team's going to win, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
uh,
Thank you.
yeah, I mean, I can't. So far, I've like been called like a vatnik a bunch of times. I've been called like a Russian troll, which I just like I can't but like laugh at that. Like, if you don't want me to tell you like any bad news, just don't fucking follow me. It's not like I'll suddenly start supporting Russia because I saw like Ukraine lose a Leopard. Like,
That's exactly how it works.
I think it bothers me, but at the same time, uh I'm not, when people are acting like that, it's usually like boomers who are on there to like do some cheerleading. I think there's like people who aren't really like truly into military stuff. They're just like following the war as a hobby, and they've taken like broad assumptions like, okay, like let's say the Russians always lie, so whatever they say the opposite is true. So if the Russians say a Leopard was destroyed, it actually isn't true. A Leopard wasn't destroyed. So instead of actually looking at the evidence, yeah, sure, most of the time they're wrong. But maybe once in a while, the Russians will say that they did something and it did happen. They'll provide video evidence or say they've captured a village and the Ukrainians have admitted, yeah, they captured that village.
I
Um,
mean, there's a reason why. Like, if it was not true that the Russians are destroying Ukrainian army, are killing Ukrainian soldiers, then they wouldn't be in Ukraine anymore. If the way
yeah,
that they were painting the picture of how this war's going was true, then there would be no more Russia in Ukraine. The war would already be over.
yeah.
But that's not
If
the case.
exactly, if the Russians were truly like totally demoralized, non-existent like supply lines, no ammunition, no artillery, no clothes, no guns. I've heard all of these. No tanks, nothing. If they truly had nothing, and they were on top of that, they were completely like brain dead, like in everything. And the Ukrainians have all the
That's true.
advantages
That
in
that's just
everything.
that's just a fact.
Yes, I mean, yeah, they do a lot of brain dead shit. Don't get me wrong, but like, if that was all true, then it would really reflect poorly on Ukraine not being able to like push them out easily. Actually, it's a little more complicated than that. It's a war. It's not gonna be as easy. Sure, like the Russians are gonna do a lot of stupid shit, but they have a lot of material left. They still have like the legacy of the Soviet army that they're destroying right now in the battlefields
Hmm.
in Ukraine. Um, and people expect them to actually like unless there's huge changes in the front, to keep this going for a while longer, if they institute further mobilization, stuff like that. So I think I told you that in the past as well, but I would prefer this to be a war of movement, not a war of attrition, because if Russia keeps doubling down on a war of attrition, I think that maybe hundreds of thousands more could die. um, and I think achieving this major success in Zaporizhia could paint the way for a Ukrainian victory that is uh, truly truly game changing. To use
Got you.
a kind of
And
labored
and
term.
and if it doesn't succeed, then there's a much higher chance of a long war of attrition.
Yeah, I think that like I think it's less likely that Ukraine would commit fully and completely deplete their new units. I think it's either gonna be they commit and break the lines and achieve some sort of success, or they don't commit because they realize that they can't break the lines there, and they decide, okay, maybe we need to do something else. Yeah,
Got you.
that's what I'm expecting. If like worst case scenario happens and they do like really destroy their units in this attack, that would be bad. It wouldn't be catastrophic. They would still have like a bunch of brigades that could like
There's
shift
still a
around to
bunch of
hold their
stuff that's
front.
promised to them that hasn't been shipped yet.
Yeah, there's also that. I
Accounting
think.
errors that have to be fixed.
Yeah, to be fair though, if they really did like destroy all their new units in an attack that failed, which I really don't believe it's likely. I think that if they saw this attack going badly, I don't think they would double down. If they did like destroy all this stuff, it would be harder for like Western governments to like fully like all these people who like do propaganda for Russia would make it more difficult for Western governments that are more reluctant to provide aid. While a success in the offensive would likely incur more aid for Ukraine. It's really weird how like when more aid is needed to do something, because if you say you're not able to do something or you're failing, uh, in, when you actually need more aid, that's when the West provides the least amount or just replacement amounts. And when you don't need that much more aid, if you have had a major success, that's when Western countries are more inclined to provide
Well,
more aid.
see, there's a simple logic to this. We like winners and we don't like losers. That's the simple logic to it. Because Americans and I think most people would like to make sure that if they're sending weapons or guns or something overseas, that it's actually being used to an effective end. And if the only videos they're seeing of all this aid being sent over, the $1 billion of aid, is it burning in like a pile of rubble, then to them it's like, well, we tried, they didn't use it well, guess we shouldn't have sent it over there, or it was a waste of time. That's just how it's going to be thought of.
Mm.
But a lot of times it's just that, well, if you don't give people enough of the right tool to do a job, it's going to be impossible, and they're going to do a half-assed job if you don't give them all the equipment they need.
Exactly. I think that like a lot of Western governments haven't really accepted this war as their own, so they don't feel the threat. So they are less likely to truly commit, mobilize their resources to their
I feel
fullest
I feel
potential.
like recently though that's not the case. I feels like recently the at least the rhetoric on this has very much shifted towards we're in this for the long haul. Ukraine is going to be a part of NATO. Ukraine is a part of our alliance structure, part of our wider economic and ideological community. That rhetoric seems to have really picked up in recent weeks, especially in the last few months.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely the rhetoric. I just in terms of like I want to see the equipment being shipped, because like it's one thing to say yeah we're in it for the long haul, and another to like you see losses and then you're like, oh, I'm out. I want to see them
Yeah.
like I want to see them see losses and say, okay, for every loss we're sort of gonna send you double the shit that you lost. Sure, I mean not everybody can swing that kind of equipment, and even the Americans can't like send like all their army to Ukraine, meaning like all their equipment. But I think the Americans could definitely commit more. I think that the Western allies could definitely not only coordinate but decide to sacrifice bigger portions of their stockpiles to ensure Ukrainian success. I feel like that right now there is like the sure like Western governments are excited to see Ukraine succeed, but also I think they are casualty averse, something that has kind of been imparted upon them over the past 20 or 30 years of fairly low intensity wars, right?
Hmm.
So that's just what I'm expecting. I hope that like that just the oh my god, there's just a bunch of mosquitoes here. I just hope that the offensive succeeds and we don't have to make like discussions like this.
I got you. I got you. Is there anything else you wanted to say about this counteroffensive? Any other developments or thoughts?
I haven't seen anything major like lately. I would say that people should wait and see a little bit longer, see how shaping operations are moving. I would expect some more movement towards Rivnopil in Velika Novosilka, trying to eliminate that height and see what progress could be made from there. But overall, I think that the real deal, like a really, really huge attack, would probably break news everywhere.
Hmm.
So I think that even if I didn't tell you to look out, you wouldn't be able to miss it. Right now, the attacks are a bit slow, and something as a piece of advice, if you're seeing a piece of equipment burning, it isn't the end of the world, okay? There's a lot of equipment out there. There's a big war. Relax. It's okay. Equipment gets lost in war. It happens.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. Would you like to shout out your page where people can find you?
Yeah, of course. Let me actually grab my links to put them in the chat as well. But I'll just send them to you on Discord. You can find me at RichardHaney17 on Twitter, and that's where I post the most. And I do stream once in a while, like I'm doing now, either when I'm having conversations or when I'm talking about offensives. And you can find my Twitch at twitch.tv/Richie_Hane. Let me send that to you as well. There you go. I send them both to you. You can put them in chat. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys follow me and maybe interact with me. I also post a bunch of jokes a lot of the time. I have some hot takes. It's okay. I'm probably not gonna blow your mind, but still, I think I'm a fun follow.
Gotcha. What type of hot takes do you have?
I don't know.
What's your thoughts on women?
Oh, women. We love women here. We are a
Gotcha.
women respecting channel. My mom is a woman. Uh, I have a sister that is also a woman. So as you can see, that qualifies me as a prominent woman respecter. Yes,
Yeah,
as
a prominent women's rights activist.
uh, I mean, hey, I would say I'm the only guy who studied military history in my race, class, and gender intersectionality course. So hey, that's my
That is
real.
true. If there's anything we need, it's more male military historians.
Yes, I've been saying this for a long time, but the future of the feminist movement is looking. It should include a lot more cis straight men. That's exactly what it should do.
Amen. I'm happy we're on the same page. Thank you so much for coming
All
on.
right. Thank you, and
Okay.
it was a lovely conversation. See you later, man.
See you later. Bye bye.
Bye bye. All right. That was a cool convo. How is everybody doing? Whoever is looking out over there. It is 2 a.m. here, so I am going to go to sleep now. We're going to raid. We're going to raid Dylan, so that we can enjoy the rest of his stream together. Raid. Dylan Burns TV, I think, right? Yeah, jump on, jump on, jump on, jump on. There we are. Very nice. 9 people and raid. Let's go.